Welcome to Holistic Human Performance Podcast. My name is Gena Bradshaw, where we talk all things holistic health, wellness, spirituality, fitness, meditation, energetics, and so much more to help you become the healthiest version of yourself. Let's dive in. This is not medical advice. This is simply to help you on your journey through health, fitness, and wellness. I hope this helps. You can complement this with anything that you are doing currently in your life. Enjoy. Have you ever felt absolutely hopeless when it comes to your health, body pain, chronic disease, mental and emotional distress, and your stress management? Yeah, I've been there too. And after years of my own health and healing journey, learning all of these different holistic healing modalities and tools, I've finally come to a point in life where I have absolutely never felt better. And I want to teach you those tools. And that's why I've created the Magnetic Mobility Meditation Program, designed specifically to tap into your body, listen to the inner wisdom it's trying to share with you, and really connect your mind, body, and soul so that you can be the healthiest, happiest version of yourself and be able to thrive in your life and truly learn about your own energy, what you need, what your non-negotiables are, as I combine this body-based practice to help you reclaim your health and thrive in your life. And did I mention that you get a 5-day free trial to the Holistic Human Performance Wellness Center, where you can access all these different programs, on-demand videos, meditations, breath work, movement, exercise, nutrition coaching, all to help you biohack your life, enhance your health and well-being, and to help you have these tools that you can put in your toolbox and you can utilize them whenever, wherever you need. Go get your 5-day free trial at www.holistichumanperformance.co/academy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Holistic Human Performance Podcast. I'm your host, Gena Bradshaw, and today we have a very special guest with us. We have Dr. John Neustadt. He is a doctor, researcher, and integrative medical expert. He is extremely accomplished, and I cannot wait to pick his brain. He's the founder and president of Nutritional Biochemistry Inc., published over 100 medical articles, written 4 health and wellness books, and his most recent book, Fracture Proof Your Bones, and so much more. I'm so excited to have you on. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So my first question, how did you even get into the field of becoming a doctor? What made you want to do that?
I had been interested in health and medicine, integrative medicine for years before I even decided to go to medical school. Frankly, when I was in college the first time, and I'll tell you why there was a second time in a moment, but the first time, medicine was never on my radar. I actually studied literature, was my degree was in literature. But then I wanted to be a journalist, and I started working as a journalist actually overseas. I was living in Chile at the time, and fell in love. And my first exposure to nature down there, having grown up in Southern California, which, as people know, is a desert, a coastal desert, not a ton of tall trees and beautiful mountains. And I fell in love with it in Southern Chile and wanted to do more environmental writing and environmental investigative journalism, but I didn't have a science background. So I came back to the States and I enrolled in a post-baccalaureate program at the University of Washington and studied botany. And during that time, I really fell in love with the molecular and cellular biology of plants and a field of study called ethnobotany, which is how societies use plants in food and medicine and commerce. After school, after that second bachelor's degree, I started working and went into high tech for a while and hated it. Started to get was miserable in that profession.
Mm-hmm.
Was still interested in integrative and holistic medicine, and I was bike commuting to work. I was rock climbing. I was growing a lot of my own food in my garden, and I started to get sick.
Mm.
I went to a medical doctor who was just an insurance doctor. I didn't know him. I was in my 20s, so I hadn't been ill before, didn't need a doctor. I went to this person, and he walked in the room with his prescription pad out in his hand. And it was one of those short appointments, pretty typical, 12, 15 minutes initial appointment. But I wanted to ask him questions. I wanted to understand what was going on with my body and what I could do to take better care of myself. He just wanted to write me a prescription and get on to the next patient.
Mm.
I left there feeling dissatisfied. I didn't get the answers. It was basically, you just have to live with it. Here's a drug. And I'd heard of Bastyr University, which is a naturopathic medical school in the Pacific Northwest in the Seattle area. Their teaching clinic was just down the street from where I lived. And I thought to myself, let me see what these people have to offer. So I went and had an amazing appointment, 45 minutes. The chief medical officer of the clinic happened to be the supervising physician at the time, and the two attending students answered all my questions. They were patient. They were teaching me, talking to me about what I could do to improve my health. And at the very end of it, the CMO, Dr. Jamie Wallace, he got to know me so well just in that initial appointment that he looked at me and he said, "You need to quit your job." That was the underlying cause of what was going on, that chronic stress of
Yeah.
being in a profession and seeing the trajectory of my life going in a way that I was really miserable with. And I think that was the third party validation, somebody outside of myself giving me that feedback, holding the mirror up to myself and letting me know, that it's okay to do something different. In fact, I need to do something different. I'd been thinking about at that point medical school. It would have,
Mm-hmm.
and that was, I think, the permission that I was looking for at that time in my life. I left my job the next week. I started enrolling in Bastyr University into their naturopathic medical program, and that was over 20 years ago.
Oh, that is so serendipitous. That is awesome. I love that. And you listened to yourself. You were like, I'm gonna do this. A lot of people don't. They would just kind of fall to the wayside with their fears and it like consumes your life.
I
It takes
finally
over your
listened to
health.
myself. I think it's like anything. The universe continues to give us signals and teach us lessons until we listen. I had been getting that signal for a while that, look, I'm in the wrong profession. I need to leave. I need to do something else. And what happened was that stress of being the proverbial what is it, square peg trying to fit into a round hole
Yep.
was starting to wreak havoc on my physiology, starting to make me chronically ill, which is happening to a lot of people out there. And so listening to the signals of the body, really being in tune with them, that I think was one of the first steps that I took to recognize the importance of listening.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's key. If you don't listen to your body, I mean, you're not going to go very far. It's going to kind of turn into a downward spiral until, like you said, you finally just surrender and you're like, all right, I have to change something. Um, so now that you've gone into, integrative medicine, I'm curious, like, what are you noticing now with the patients that you're seeing with, I mean, you've written over 100 medical articles. Like, what is it that is there a particular pattern that you notice with society? Yeah, kind of what piques your interest now because you wrote your most recent book, Fracture Proof Your Bones. So I'm curious to like dive into that as well.
Those are great questions, and there's a lot to unpack in what you just said. So let me just
Hmm.
tease apart a couple of I think nuggets that'll resonate well with listeners.
Yeah.
The first is that, over, I've been doing this now for more than 2 decades, and what I've seen as a trend it's continuing, this interest in integrative medicine is continuing to get more and more popular. And the overall, the people who seem to be seeking it out, that however doesn't seem to have changed much
Mm,
in terms of people who go through the conventional system. They tend not to be getting benefits. They're getting sicker, or they've plateaued. They've been through that conventional path and they're dissatisfied, just like I was. And
hmm
we're all consumers. For me, medicine is it's a consumer driven profession. And just like going to a restaurant, if I'm not satisfied with the service that I get, well, I don't go back. And not just the service, I'm not satisfied with the food either. If I'm not satisfied with what I'm consuming in the appointment with a doctor, and I'm asking for what I need, then I start looking to see if there are other alternative ways to approach what's going on, just like I did. And that's what a lot of people do, and how they end up with me or people like me. The conventional medical system is taking note. You see more and more conventionally trained physicians interested in integrative and functional medicine, but there is no definition officially of what it means to be an integrative physician.
mm,
So people can say, I have a massage therapist in my practice, so I do integrative medicine, or I do nutritional medicine, but yet there's no way for consumers necessarily to vet and understand their level of training, because in the conventional medical system, there is no nutritional training beyond maybe a passing mention or maybe one class. But
yeah.
within the naturopathic medical curriculum, we have 5 quarters of nutritional medicine. And it's woven into all of our clinical rotations, as well as 5 quarters of botanical medicine. So this holistic approach, in addition to pharmacology and minor surgery and radiology, all of that is woven into the fabric of a naturopathic doctor's training from the beginning. Whereas conventional docs, while I applaud their interest in this, and I think it's fantastic that they're moving in that direction, just because you go to somebody who says they do integrative medicine doesn't mean that, first of all, that's the only way to do it. So if you also aren't getting the benefits that you're seeking from that doctor, understand that that doesn't mean that integrative medicine is a failure. It may just mean that that person's approach is not the right approach for you, and there are still other ways to look at it, and other ways that people are trained.
mm, mm. So I want to share this story, and I share it all the time because this is a perfect example of what you're saying. So I'm a two-time cancer survivor, and just throughout my pursuit of, leaning into more of the holistic health, integrative medicine, I came across two different doctors who were potentially going to do my surgery. And most people won't do this. They'll only go to one doctor and they'll just stick with that doctor, right? And their protocol, not knowing that there are other protocols. And when I went to see the second doctor, he told me something completely different for the thyroid surgery that I was going to have. He was like, we're just going to remove half. You're not going to have to go on radioactive iodine, and you're not going to have to be on medication for the rest of your life. And I was like, winner, like I'm going to do that. So I mean, my whole body cringed with the other protocol of what the first doctor had said. And so I leaned into that and listened to also my intuition when I was trying to choose, like, you know, my healthcare team who's gonna have my back and do the best for me. So what are some things that you recommend people kind of asking their practitioners, or when they're trying to like build their healthcare team?
That's a great question. So I think it depends. Part of it depends on what the diagnosis is, or what their goals are.
Mm,
So with cancer, because you just mentioned that, I do believe that it's great for people to have a conventional oncologist with a naturopathic oncologist, a board certified naturopathic oncologist on board, to
mm-hmm,
get those complementary approaches. Absolutely. For people who are mental health issues like depression, for example, they may not benefit from conventional treatments like medications, which are typically the first line.
Yeah.
And I don't believe it's always necessary to have a conventionally trained physician on board if you're looking to get an approach or treatment for depression. I think in terms of what to look for in terms of a care team, however, is something that feels right. It's
Mm,
not necessarily this black and white approach, because people aren't black and white, and people are complicated, and medical histories are complicated, and people's goals are individual to them and what they need to do. And so I think that the first step is identifying what your goal is and working backwards from there, and then asking the question, who can help me get there, and interviewing people just like you did with your oncologists and the surgeons, and what the approach they were going to have for you. And a lot of doctors will do introductory conversations with you. They'll hop on the phone for 10 minutes or so, and you can ask them, if they do this, what their approach is. They're not going to necessarily give you a treatment plan or specific advice for you, because they don't know your medical history. They don't know you well enough, and you're not an established patient, but you can get an understanding of how they think, whether
mm,
that resonates with you, how they may approach a case in a situation like your own. And let me give you an example. One of the things that I found challenging in clinical medicine, especially in the integrative world, is that people will go through functional testing, which is testing that looks at the underlying biochemical issues that are going on, looking at, for example, whether you have enough vitamins, minerals, proteins, fats to do that your body has enough of those to do their job, because many symptoms of diseases and diseases themselves are caused by nutritional deficiencies, or just what it's called nutritional insufficiencies.
hmm.
And then what happens is people are put on dietary supplements. And even if there's not testing being done, people are put on and recommended dietary supplements with no plan to ever get them off. And I've had people
Mm,
literally come into me with a duffel bag, small duffel bag, but a duffel bag, full of bottles and
yeah.
test results. And they said, well, this is what they gave me. And I said, well, did they tell you how long to take it? No, just for that. To me is an absurd way to approach patients.
Mm,
To me, it's about reestablishing the body's biochemistry, reestablishing physiology, helping the body heal, reestablishing health through various modalities, not just supplementation, but diet, lifestyle, exercise, and then working with people to maintain those benefits primarily through diet and lifestyle moving forward, not taking handfuls of pills and powders for the rest of their life.
mm. That is so valid because I see that a lot. And, I'll ask people like, okay, so what's your lifestyle like? Sedentary, not eating, the right foods, eating fast food, but they're taking, they'll go see an integrative medical doctor, functional, and they'll get just 40 different supplements to take without changing their lifestyle. And that's,
Yeah.
I mean, you need the foundation to the home or it's going to crumble.
So true. And I like the saying, you can't exercise away a bad diet.
You can't.
You
It's
can't.
impossible.
But it's also not necessary to 180 degrees change your diet, your lifestyle, everything going on in your life immediately. In fact, I recommend people don't do that.
Yeah.
Everybody could probably benefit from some improving in some areas of their life. Typically, by the time people get to me, they've been sick, chronically sick for a long time. And the
Mm,
standard American diet is tragically awful. It
awful.
promotes inflammation. It promotes chronic diseases. 80% of cancers are considered primarily caused by diet and lifestyle. Cardiovascular disease, dementia, arthritis, osteoporosis, all of those chronic diseases that nobody wants, but are the number one killers in the US, are primarily caused by diet and lifestyle as we get older. And yes, there can be, hormones that are involved, especially with osteoporosis, with the drop in estrogen, with menopause, and that's involved. But you can supplement with hormones when it's indicated as well. But even with that, the foundation of our health is biochemical. And
Mm,
biochemistry is very simply, I mean, people get whole PhDs in biochemistry, right? It gets very complicated. But very simply, biochemistry is how the body uses vitamins, minerals, fats, and proteins to do its job, and how things like nutritional deficiencies and infections and environmental toxins interfere with that proper biochemical function and create disease. And the thinking, and this is in two of the books I wrote, the underlying thought is, if you weren't sick last year or 5 years but you are now, something's changed in your biochemistry. Can we identify what's going on and correct it and fix it? Not just so
mhm,
we're treating a symptom, which the
mhm.
conventional approach primarily does with medications, but we're actually curing you. We're actually working towards reestablishing health and reestablishing those foundations of long-term health.
Mm. Oh yeah. I mean, scream it from the rooftop. Like so I want to switch gears a bit. I want to talk about your latest book, Fracture Proof Your Bones. What inspired you to write this book about osteoporosis?
Like almost everything that I do in this field, it's my patients.
Yeah.
And when I was early on in my clinic, in my private practice I had, it was in Montana at the time. I had patients coming into me with osteoporosis. My mother-in-law has osteoporosis. I was doing what I was trained to do with my patients, and their bone density was getting better. So I thought I was doing a great job. My mother-in-law, she was working with, her medical doctor at the time. She's taking Fosamax. Her bone density was going up. I was giving her some recommendations nutritionally as well, but she was happy. Her physician was happy, and I was happy because her test results were moving in the right direction.
Mm,
And then she fell on an area rug in her house and broke her hip. She didn't even fall that hard, but she broke
yeah.
her hip. And I thought to myself, what is going on here? Because by the objective measure, that test result that is almost exclusively the only thing that's looked at and tracked conventionally, she should have been protected. And she was on the medication and she
Mm,
wasn't. And what I discovered as I started reading and digging more into the research was that focus solely on that bone density test, or almost exclusively, is woefully inadequate. We've known since the 1990s that a bone density test predicts less than half of people who will break a bone. And in fact, in 2008, a study came out that quantified that even further, that showed for women with osteoporosis, a bone density test only predicts 44% of them who will break a bone, and only 21% of men. And every medical organization that has looked at this disease and looked at the data have correctly concluded that fracture risk depends on factors largely other than bone density. And that's the bottom line with osteoporosis. That's the most dangerous thing. Breaking a bone is the most dangerous thing with osteoporosis. Osteoporosis fractures, they cause more days spent in hospitals than other conditions like heart attacks, diabetes, and breast cancer. And if
wow.
you're a woman with osteoporosis and break a hip, there's up to a 36% chance that you're going to be dead within a year. Those who survive, half of them never regain their pre-fracture, pain-free lifestyle, level of mobility and enjoyment that they had before. And a significant number of those even continue to need help with basic activities of daily living, like dressing themselves, going to the bathroom, and shopping. And lastly, I'll just drive this home, this statistic, because to me it's shocking. A woman's risk for an osteoporosis fracture is equal to her combined risk of breast, uterine, and ovarian cancer. And every 30 seconds somewhere in the world, somebody is breaking a bone because of osteoporosis.
Hmm. That's, I mean, very eye-opening. And so I'm glad we're on this topic because I noticed now my mom, my aunt, and I believe my grandmother all have been on Synthroid for their thyroid. And they all have early, well, I don't want to say early signs, but osteoporosis. Like, so it's interesting to me. You mentioned medically induced. Can you talk more about that? It's just interesting to me that you're, saying this, and then I'm kind of like connecting the dots a little bit.
There is a long list of medications that cause osteoporosis, and unfortunately it's a blind spot for most physicians. They're prescribing these medications and not knowing that the research is clear out there in the medical literature, that all of these medications, a lot of them that they're prescribing, are creating damaging bone and causing osteoporosis. There are a lot of medical conditions also that create osteoporosis. So let me just break that down a little bit for you. So first,
Okay.
you mentioned Synthroid. So that's a thyroid hormone. Only if somebody is over medicated is that associated or can cause osteoporosis. So if
Mm,
somebody's thyroid hormone is, they're taking supplemental thyroid hormone as a medicine, and their TSH, which is typically what's monitored, is in the healthy range, there's not a risk for developing osteoporosis. It's only when they're over medicated where
mm,
that becomes a concern with the medications. However, there are other medications where even just their normal prescribed use is not only creating osteoporosis but creating fractures. One of those commonly prescribed are the antidepressants. Anything that artificially elevates serotonin, like Prozac, Lexapro, Wellbutrin, those damage bone. There are serotonin receptors in the bone. In fact, people are probably familiar with serotonin as one of our happy hormones, happy chemicals in the brain, but 90% of serotonin isn't even produced in the brain. It's produced in your gut. And then
mm.
it goes to the bone where there's receptors in bone. And it's part of the normal healthy bone physiology when serotonin is in normal healthy levels. But when you artificially increase that serotonin, it builds up to an unhealthy, abnormal level. And what happens is it creates so much damage to bone. Many studies have looked at this, that now it's thought that for a woman taking an SSRI medication for 1 to 5 years, that for every 19 of women who are taking that, one will break a bone. And it's with the SNRI medications as well, those that don't increase serotonin as much, but still do. Those also cause osteoporosis and fractures. And most doctors who are prescribing them have no idea that that's an issue or that's a problem. Acid blocking medications. So proton pump inhibitors like Prilosec are associated with an increased fractures. People are taking them, they're buying them over the counter. So they think they're just safe long term. The FDA never approved them for long term use. In fact, the first warning letter by the FDA about the risk for fractures and bone damage from those medications went out in 2010. This is
Wow.
not new information. Now we
No.
know people taking them continuously for 4 years, there's a 60% increased risk of hip fractures. And it's not just that year 4 it jumps up. It's going up. The risk is going up since then. But not only that, these proton pump inhibitors, these acid blockers, we know they create dysbiosis, they create nutritional deficiencies, they create a whole host of other long-term problems, when in fact 50% of the acid blocking medications are prescribed for just one condition, which is acid reflux. And through
Mm.
some simple dietary changes, many people won't even need those acid blocking medications. There are 5 foods that most commonly cause acid reflux: tomatoes, raw garlic and onions, citrus, chocolate, coffee. Some people may react to mint, like peppermint. Some people may react to spicy foods. It's about experimenting, but just improving and changing your diet can make a huge difference in terms of those medications. With
Mm.
cancer, aromatase inhibitors that drop estrogen in estrogen receptor positive cancers, like breast cancers, for 20% of women taking them long term will fracture. And that's a short list. I mean, prednisone, what are they? Epilepsy medications, certain
Mm.
categories of epilepsy medications create osteoporosis and fractures. Parkinson's disease medication can do that. Again, this is a short list. The list goes on, and most doctors aren't even aware that they're creating this problem.
Wow. I mean, yeah, it's like a cycle that it's like, how do we get out of this hamster wheel of just like, I mean, it's so much bigger than this, obviously, and that's a whole nother topic for discussion.
Right.
But so okay, in terms of being able to like, take back your health, take the control back, what are some things that you suggest for people to increase their bone density and have healthy bones?
I walk people through in my book exactly that process of how to
Okay.
create a holistic plan for themselves that makes sense for their health. So in the chapter on it's called Check Your Medicine Cabinet, basically medication induced osteoporosis. And on the chapter on osteoporosis medications, there are questions that people should take to their doctor to ask to make sure that they are getting the best treatment, that the treatments that are being recommended actually aren't creating more problems. Like, medications may be appropriate for people with osteoporosis. It just depends, but the research is clear. They don't reduce all fractures in all people in all types of osteoporosis. So understanding that is important because many doctors don't understand that level of detail. And I go through that in my book. Again, asking the right questions and learning the questions to ask are important. I think in terms of, there are two sides to this puzzle that I like to teach people.
Mm,
One is there's a side to this issue where you're destroying your bones. Things that you're doing are causing damage. So we want to minimize that or get rid of that. We want to stop that damage from occurring. And then on the other side, we want to do things and give the body things to help the body do what it naturally wants to do anyway, which is grow healthy bones.
mm,
Our bones are they're living tissues. And by the way, they do more than just help us stand upright and protect our internal organs and walk and hug our loved ones and all that stuff. They also produce our red blood cells and white blood cells and platelets. There's research showing that there is a gut bone connection and a brain bone connection and a heart bone connection, that there's some systemic hormones that the bone produces, and also receptors on bone from elsewhere like melatonin. There are melatonin receptors in bone. So it's a dynamic living system. It used to be taught, and maybe it still is, that you reach your peak bone density in your 20s and then it's all downhill from there.
mm,
And that's just simply not true. We can regrow bone. And it's not just about the mineral component of bone. That's important. That's what the bone density is. The bone density are the minerals in bones, like calcium.
mm,
And that's what a bone density test measures. A bone density test is a type of X-ray test that's done. It only measures the mineral component of bone, but bone is a tissue. So there's more than just minerals. If it were just minerals, it would be brittle and just break easily. But it's the extracellular components of bone, the other components of bone beyond just the minerals, which include collagen and other proteins. There are 180 to 200 proteins in bone, including collagen, which is a structural protein. It's in our skin. It gives elasticity to skin, and it's what gives the ultimate strength to bones. If you were to take a chicken bone and soak it in vinegar, you'd strip out all the minerals. And if you were to get rid of all the mineral in bone, it would still not break because of that collagen. You can bang it, you can bend it, you can twist it. It won't break. It's like a rubber chicken bone. But if you were to take the collagen and remove it, and all you were left with is the minerals, it's brittle, like a column of chalk, and it just breaks easily. So understanding that we're not just working at improving bone density, we're working to improve bone quality.
mm,
And here are all of the things that the research shows that can improve bone strength, not just the quantity of bone, but the strength of bone. And the ultimate indicator of whether bone is strong is not bone density. I already discussed the limits of that. It's whether or not somebody breaks a bone. So looking at clinical trials where they looked at fractures as the outcome, that to me is the gold standard. And so whether it's asking for what's a diet show? Well, has this diet, you're recommending me eat a certain way. Well, has it been shown to reduce fractures, not just improve bone density? Well, what about exercise? Has this exercise been shown to reduce fractures? Has these supplements, these nutrients that you're recommending, have the individual nutrients that are in this, have they been shown to reduce fractures? And there, by the way, only 4 nutrients that have been shown to do that. So that's what I teach people in the book, and not only teach them and add the questions, I give them the answers. I
Mm,
review the research. I go through what the research shows. What is the healthiest dietary pattern? It's the Mediterranean dietary pattern for longevity, for long-term health. It's associated with a 21% reduction in hip fracture risk, 20% reduction in osteoporosis risk. And that's essentially a plant-forward omnivore diet. Lots of whole fruits and vegetables, the exact opposite of the standard American diet.
mm,
How should somebody approach exercise? What's the healthiest, safest way to exercise? And in fact, if you're looking at fracture risk, 95% of fractures occur because somebody falls. So anything we can do with strength and balance to reduce the risk for falling, or environmental modifications, making sure your home is safe, that there aren't things you're going to trip over, like my mother-in-law, can reduce your risk for fractures. And unfortunately, 94% of the elderly, that's people over 65 by definition, they're prescribed medications that increases their risk for falling. And so that's another area of concern for me.
mm, mm. Yeah, that's a really valid point. That because it affects their balance. It can
Absolutely.
I see it with my grandfather. He's in his 90s, he's on a bunch of medication, and like, he's like disoriented sometimes, like not able to stand properly and things of that nature. So that is a valid point. Um, I did have a question. What are your thoughts on the DEXA scan?
I think that it has its limitations. As I mentioned, it only predicts 44% of women with osteoporosis and 21% of men who have fracture. It is
Mm-hmm.
the gold standard, though. It is
Yeah.
the technology against which all other technologies are compared. It is used to diagnose osteoporosis. And despite its limitations, I believe people should get bone density tests
Mm-hmm.
and should be followed up periodically with repeat bone density tests, because despite its limitations, it has some predictive value.
Mm-hmm.
It just shouldn't be overemphasized. I mean, one of the first things I do when people come to me, they've typically already been diagnosed and they're scared. They've got their bone density test results. Oftentimes, the doctor is pressuring them or telling them they have to start a medication immediately. And I tell them to take a deep breath. Just take a breath. Let's put this in perspective. I tell them what I've already shared with you and your listeners about the limitations of the bone density test, that fracture risk depends on factors largely other than bone density. And I put it in its proper perspective. I say, okay, there's time. It's serious. This is serious, but it's not an emergency. There's time for you to educate yourself, to become informed, and create a holistic plan that makes sense for you. And
Mm,
medications may be part of that, but they may not also.
mm. Yes. Okay. Great. I mean, I'm not sure, but what other testing is there for bone density?
So there are different technologies that do exist.
Mm,
None of them have been proven to be better than a bone density test. They're all, again, compared to the bone density test. So there's quantitative CT scans. So if somebody's had an abdominal CAT scan, then that information can be converted into what's called a T-score equivalent or a DEXA scan equivalent. They're measuring different things. So the CT scan and the DEXA scan and an MRI are measuring different things, but there's algorithms that can be applied if the radiologist understands it, if they have the software to do it, that can convert it into DEXA equivalents or give a comparison.
mm,
So that's one thing, or a couple of things. There's ultrasound, and that may be in a doctor's office. It's typically done on the heel, and it's portable technology. It does not expose people to radiation. It looks more at bone quality than quantity. The challenge with that technology is it's not standardized. The reference ranges or even the variables that are being looked at are not standardized between the different manufacturers in the industry. And so each manufacturer has to validate their technology, their machine, their reference ranges against a bone density test. And so you have to ask if that's available to you, if that's being recommended, has this been validated? Has the machine you've been using? And the only way the clinician would know that, or the technologist would know that, is if they've contacted the manufacturer.
Mm,
And so, or they've read the research on the technology. So that's a challenge with that. But even if that comes up to show a problem, for me, that's just an indication. Okay, then it's time to refer somebody for a bone density test. It's a
mm,
good way to start a conversation in an office, but then they do need to go get a bone density test. An exciting new technology, or relatively new, that's just starting to emerge. It came out in 2019, is a new type of ultrasound. It's an abdominal ultrasound. It's abbreviated REMS, and it's been validated now against people as young as 30 years old, which, by the way, a T score, that is what the bone density test result gives. It gives two different scores, but T score is typically what's interpreted for osteoporosis. It's not validated for a bone density test in premenopausal women or people younger than 50, right?
mm,
So this REMS technology now has been validated as young as 30 years old, and they've created what's called a fracture score. A fracture score compares the results of your REMS test to a database of healthy bones of your same age or younger age range, and gives you your fracture score. And that actually was shown only in one study, but in one study to be even more predictive than a bone density test for fractures. So I'd like to see more research on that. It looks promising. It is not widely available yet,
mm,
but it is something that's emerging. There are blood tests that can be run as well. There are a lot of blood tests, but similar to the ultrasound, there's a lack of standardization among the labs of the different types of blood tests. Medical organizations like the International Osteoporosis Foundation and what is it, International Federation for Laboratory and Clinical Chemistry. There are only two bone markers that are recommended by them. One is called a CTX, and the other is P1NP.
mm,
Look, those can tell you if you're breaking down bone. CTX is a breakdown product of collagen, but it's
mm.
not really that predictive for fractures. It can, and bone is complicated to sort of boil it down to just one measurement, one variable. Doesn't really give the best picture. So that's why I like to look at this more holistically. Vitamin D is an important lab test to run. The research shows that the maximum fracture reduction occurs when people's vitamin D are between 30 to 44.
Mm.
So making sure it's at least that. A lot of doctors want it even higher for immune benefits, but at least 30 to 44 is important. And then there's some other lab tests here and there that can give some information. But the state of the research and where we're at is there isn't just one fantastic test that's going to give you the best advice. It's really looking at this more holistically that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really great to know because it gives people like that hope of like, okay, like I can, go get this test or I can try this. There's options. You don't need to be square peg fitting in a round hole. Thank
Exactly.
you so much for your knowledge and your wisdom. And with that, as we wrap up, are there any words of wisdom that you would like to leave the listeners?
I mentioned what I like to tell people, which is that it's not an emergency. It's important, it's serious, but there is time to get your ducks in a row, to educate yourself, to make sure you're making decisions that are comfortable, that you're comfortable with. If you decide to take a medication, it's important to understand that you have to be compliant 70 to 80% of the time to get the benefits. With the oral bisphosphonates that are the first line therapy, those over 50% of people discontinue those in the first year because of side effects,
Mm,
even more the second year. So really understanding what it takes to be compliant if you're looking at a medication is important. And I would just say, with respect to supplementation, it's crucial to think beyond just calcium and vitamin D. Calcium and vitamin D have been shown in clinical trials to reduce fractures maybe 18 to 23%. But
Mm.
it's this nutrient that I found when I started doing my initial research called MK4, a specific form of vitamin K2 that's been approved by the Ministry of Health in Japan for bone health since 1995. That when that's added, or when that's used in the amount of 45 milligrams per day, it's been shown repeatedly to not only promote healthy bone density, but maintain strong bones, as indicated by over 70% reduction in fractures. And so I think that's an important component of anybody's holistic plan to help improve and promote their bone health. And I, in fact, I talked to you early on in this interview about, why did I get into this? Why the book? Well, my patients have been my best teachers, and I like to solve problems. And I have this problem with my patients. I also, as I was going through the research and looking at the bone health and osteoporosis research, I discovered a problem, which was there wasn't a product that had the clinical dose of MK4 in it in the United States with calcium and vitamin D that the research is clear works. And
Yeah.
so I created NBI, that Nutritional Biochemistry Incorporated company, to create that solution for my patients to help
Mm.
them. So there was the clinical dose of MK4 available with the calcium and vitamin D as a resource, just like my book and other things that I do. And so that's sort of the genesis of my entire supplement company. I needed solutions for my patients, but asking that question, which nutrients have been shown not just to improve bone density, but maintain strong bones as indicated by fewer fractures, that's crucial to ask as well. And that's the question I was asking. And that's why I created the solutions I've created, not just for my patients then, but now available to anybody online.
That's awesome. I'm sending it to my mom immediately. Thank you so much for coming on. It was such a pleasure having you and just being able to share your experience, your knowledge, and giving people that hope like you have options. Take a breath and you'll figure it out. You just got to have the right people and ask the right questions.
So true. So true.
Thank you. So, guys, if you like this episode, like, share, subscribe. Oh, and by the way, John, where can people find you?
Thank you for asking. My website is the best place to find more information and to reach me at. It's nbihealth.com, nbihealth.com.
Perfect. And guys, I will add that to the show notes. And yes, I hope you like, share, subscribe, send this with someone who may be struggling with osteoporosis and needs this information so that they can find John and his work. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.